If you're just starting out on your environmental product declaration journey, this video is for you, all right? It's the kind of 101 of environmental product declarations, or EPDs, because that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? It takes you through the basics, such as, what is it, who uses them, how do you make them, what's in them, what are the various stages involved, etc. Video is about 35, 40 minutes long, so, if you don't want to sit through the video, have a look at my book. Product carbon footprints are included in here as well. And I think in Carbon College on YouTube and on Teachable, I think we've got some other resource materials coming out on the course, the EPD course that we're putting on Teachable. So, lots of different ways to learn. So I've got myself a nice cup of tea, and let's start at the top and work our way through it. All right, here we go. So this deck is about 12-15 slides long. It's not very long, and as I say, it's designed to take you up from real basic stuff up to a level of knowledge so you can at least know what they are, how they're produced, what's in them, etc., etc. It's based around the Anistic Easy EPD service, which I'm super excited about. We've been working on this for such a long time, and it's certainly the simplest. With AI out there, I don't think any of the other EPD platforms I've looked at have the AI help, and that just makes it so much easier. But it's also the cheapest. So if you're looking for a low-cost EPD and still got the quality levels in there, then that's what Easy EPD is designed for. So we think it's going to be big. We think it's going to be very popular with our clients. So we're super excited, as the Americans would say, about this. Okay, so let's crack on. What is an environmental product declaration, which from now on I just call it EPD. Okay, everybody does. An EPD is independently verified report that shows all of the impact on the environment of a product. Okay, they're supposed to be the creme de la creme, the Rolls Royce of kind of analysis of product and the impact of products, and they're becoming de rigueur. You'll find them becoming more and more popular. More and more people are wanting them. More and more people are sort of saying, well, is that better than that? What's the impact of it? The classic one I see, for example, is looking at the impact of electric cars versus diesel cars. We all know that the electric cars produce less pollution as they run, but they have that higher cost at the front, don't they, of production, with all the sort of rare earth metals that go into the battery. That's a classic use of EPDs. You could look at both the manufacture and the use and the disposal of electric cars, compare that with the environmental impact of a diesel car, and you should be able to compare apples for apples. Okay? That's the gist. Why should you care about this? Well, sustainability is now going up people's agenda, isn't it? It really is becoming more and more important. That's one reason. EPDs are the gold standard. They don't get any better than that. And so if you're thinking about sort of doing some calculations about how good or bad your products are, you can. It's not a problem. But EPDs really are the absolute sort of icing on the cake in terms of quality. The main reason, and I won't sugarcoat it, the main reason people do EPDs is because people these days, clients of yours, will probably say, unless you've got an EPD, we can't do business with you. Okay, and that's happening more and more and more, especially in anything to do with steel, construction, anything in that sector. Of big heavy chemicals, or big heavy processes involved. That's where EPDs are really taking hold. Okay, you'll find that the big sort of house builders these days will kind of require an EPD to do business. If they don't, that's certainly the way they're all moving. I was with the sort of the great and the good of the industry the other day, and that's certainly high on their agenda, if not top. It's very, very high. Okay. The role of an EPD, what's it for? Well, first off, it's for transparency. It's supposed to show you, warts and all, how good or bad your product is. Okay, they're not designed as marketing pieces to say, my God, it's great. It doesn't do that. It kind of said, here's all the facts. Make your own mind up. Okay, they're supposed to build trust in the brand, because the people that do them, they have, because of the transparency, they have to look at where the hotspots are. Okay, so if you've got a product that's got a really, really nasty component in it, and you know it's nasty, it's a really sort of bad piece of plastic, or it's bad sort of heavy metal, or whatever it's going to be, an EPD will show that up. And so it kind of forces you to acknowledge where the problems with your product could be, or to put it in friendlier terms, what could be improved, certainly. The biggest thing that EPDs allow you to do is compare products. And I was with a group of people the other day, and one of the delegates at this sort of session I was teaching asked about forklifts. He said, look, my company buys quite a few forklifts, quite large, well, a very large company, buy quite a few forklift trucks. How do I know which is better, A or B? And the answer is, have a look at the EPDs. Okay, now this company's got such a lot of clout in the industry, they're a super large company, that they could probably, if the forklift truck manufacturers haven't got EPDs, go back and say, look, please can you put them in? We're going to struggle to renew your contract unless you put an EPD in. Because with the EPD you can then compare A versus B, and most people look at the CO2 emissions and just say that's got a lower CO2 emission than that's a better one. All right, so that's the kind of the role of the EPDs. What's in them? I mentioned the CO2 emissions. That's the nice simple one. That's what everyone understands. That's what everybody goes to. But it's got other stuff in as well. It's got the water and the energy use. So if you've got products that take a huge amount of water to produce, EPDs listed out. How much water does it take to produce the product? How much land is required? How much energy, right? You've also got all of the emissions that go into water and soil. Okay, it's called eutrophication. It's got all those kind of pollutants in. And if you are looking for example, fertilizers that are not going to sort of make the runoff into the watercourse worse, you could look at that aspect of an EPD. There's lots and lots of stuff in there. Most people, 9 times out of 10, it is the carbon, though. That's the one they all look at. Okay, so, but it's all in there. It's quite a bit of information in there. Okay, so it's a range of emissions or impacts, as we call them, of which sort of carbon dioxide is one of those. Okay, where do they fit in to the kind of broader scale of a product's sort of design decision? It's generally, it says on here a few things, but it's generally to do with the procurement. All right, so it's generally people saying 2 things. How do I, what's the carbon footprint, for example, of my house or these houses that I'm building? What's the carbon footprint of them? And then coupled with that, if I wanted to improve the carbon footprint, where are the hot spots on the build, and what could I swap to a better alternative that's got a lower, for example, carbon dioxide emissions? So you've got 2 things. A, what is the carbon footprint? And B, how do I improve it? And again, that's in the construction sector. Okay. What it isn't is any sort of certification that you are super green. The EPD is a statement of fact of what it is, not that it's great. It's not like saying this is an A-star triple rated thing. It's not. Just said, look, here's the facts, make your own mind up. As I say, the people that do them tend to then go back and concentrate on the hotspots and improve them. So it's a kind of like virtuous circle thing going on, but it's not a guarantee of quality. It's more a statement of this is what it is. These are the impacts my product has on the environment. Okay, time for a pause for a cup of tea. Very nice it is too. And let's look about how they are created. Broadly speaking, there is something called the lifecycle assessment, okay, or LCA. It's a very common term. You'll see it all over the place, in sort of the land of product carbon footprints. An LCA looks at the impact of a product from when it was first sort of, in the ground, or, if you're taking out for raw materials in the ground or in the trees, whatever it is, where your raw materials are, right through the shipping of it to the factory to manufacture the raw materials that the factory then produces the goods that then get installed on a construction site, for example, typically, or they get installed somewhere. They then get used. After the sort of useful life of the product, they then get disposed of, and some of the parts are then recycled back again. So they're the major parts of an LCA. In terms of, if I can show you, let me see if I can get this right with my sort of system here. Bear with me a second. If I show you how we represent that this is Easy EPD, you're looking at it now. If you go into an EPD here, or a life cycle assessment, sorry, these modules are generally known as modules, A, B, C, and D. And you can see they've kind of got the different components here. There's the product itself, construction, the use, end of life, and recycling. Okay, so that's the kind of what a life cycle is. And so we look at all of the impacts to do with manufacture, all of the impacts to do with use, all of the impacts to do with, what happens at the end of life, and all of the impacts to do with recycling, if there's recycling components in there. Okay. With Easy EPD, the consultant will lead you through that process. There's quite a lot in it, won't lie. But if you've got the data, and the data you generally need is the materials that you sort of purchased during a typical year. So if you've got 12 months worth of data of what you've purchased, what your energy costs were, etc., energy use was, etc., that's the information you need for an EPD. But there is quite a lot, but the carbon consultant team will take you through it. And with Easy EPD, you get a dedicated consultant who'll take you through these things one by one. We produce the life cycle assessment, that kind of grid that I showed you with all the bits in it, and I've got an example of that a bit later on. I'll click into the software and show you what's inside one of those modules. But your consultant will take you through it. Once we've got something that you and your consultant think, do you know what, that's it, that's complete, yeah? What we then do is we get it verified. And that's a third party. We're not allowed to do it ourselves, so it has to be someone else. And so we will sort of work with you to select a verifier. And the verifier's got certain sort of stamps to say, I can do this. And they will have the authority to sign it off and then say, yes, in my opinion, this meets the standard. And the standard it meets varies. Okay, so if you're making, for example, pencils, you will need to produce a different kind of set of information to if you're producing, for example, concrete slabs. What you need to put in each of the LCAs, the life cycle assessments, depends on the product. And the way that's specified is there's a whole pile of them, there's loads of ISO standards, okay, saying if you are producing something in this category, you will need to follow the following rules, okay, and it says what must be included, sometimes it says how that's processed, etc., etc. And those ISO standards in this context are called product category rules, or PCRs, okay, so your consultant will work with you to select the right PCR, product category rules, i.e., what needs to go in and out of the LCA, and then they'll go through with you and make sure that the LCA we come up with meets the required standard of the PCR. And the verifier takes the PCR, takes the life cycle assessment, it's all online these days, with the Anistic system, but they take both of them and then they go, yeah, do you know what, they match, okay? Once that's happened, you then publish it. That means that all of the designers who are, for example, designing new buildings can just pull it straight from the database and put it straight into their BIM systems that they use to design various sort of buildings. If you are not using BIM, if you're for example, just looking at which forklift truck to buy, then again you can go to these recognized databases and do a search on, for example, forklift trucks, and there'll be a whole pile of forklift trucks in there with EPDs sitting in there that you can then reference. Okay, last comment on here, it's renewed every 5 years, so just brace yourself. Normally the renewals are not so bad. If you've done the work once, the hard work's done the first time, but you do need to refresh it. That's probably a better word, actually, refresh rather than renewed, because things change. As typically, for example, the electricity supplied to most countries is shifting more and more to have a greater mix of renewables in it. The impact associated with lots of energy use isn't as bad as it used to be, and it's just changing over time. So every 5 years you take a jolly good look about all the factors, choose the ones that have changed, update your EPD, and then resubmit it for verification. Okay, nice and easy. Let's show you the system in a bit of operation in terms of easy EPD and looking at, I'm going to concentrate on probably this first section, and it's true to say that the first one, you sort of like the deep end, aren't you? A1, this one here, material extraction, is probably the most complex. And this, by the way, material extraction they're the raw materials that go into your product. Okay, that's what that is. Okay, there's a way of adding it in. So we've got a database of, God knows, loads of them. I think there's something like 18,000 different products we've got in here with about 300 factors, impacts, pollution, land use, etc. for each. It's a massive database. And that database there, we need to find the thing. Let's say we're doing, for example, nails. So let's say the product we have has got nails in it. Don't know what, it's nails. Down here, they might be steel nails. So we'll do steel. And you can see in the database, we've got 398 types of steel. Let's just say we know that they're rolled. And that's information you're going to need about the products that go into your, the raw materials that go into your product. Okay. So you're going to need to know what you use and where it comes from, because that's the other pull down here. So in terms of rolled steel, and you can see this is keyword 1, this is keyword 2, that sort of searches it down to that number of results, and the keyword 2 just kind of narrows it down. Really easy to use. We're really happy with the sort of way that worked out. We went through a few versions of that search system, but this works really well. And you can choose where it comes from, because you could choose to get your rolled steel from loads of different places. In this particular case, it's Europe, which gives us 10 results down here. And then you can see the stuff down here. I'm going to say it is hot rolled steel, chromium, ... that one there. And then you have to say how much of it you bought in the previous year. So for example, I bought 3,000, what's the unit here? Kilograms. That's not much, is it? So 30,000 kilograms, i.e. 30 tons of this stuff. And for this particular product, because this is for, good name, test EPD, but let's assume that said, for example, I don't know, door frame or something like that. Then for the door frame, because we make 2 different types of door frame, I only use 50% of that steel for this particular door frame. Okay, and that caters for if you've got a range of products you're manufacturing. So you do all that, you type it all in, you add it down here, submit it, and then it comes into this big list of products you've got here, and there it is, nails, ... I didn't set whether it's packaging. I just go back in and just say no, it's a raw material. Just need to tick that, because it might also be packaging, so assuming that these door frames come shipped on a pallet, etc., you need to put in the pallet and the wrapping of the pallet and stuff like that. Or you could just say no, this is a process. So this particular, you wouldn't really do it for steel, but you'd have it in there for electricity and fuel generally. That's the thing there. So you do all that, you come back to a list of components here, adds it all up down here. You've got totals down here, and that is one of the components of the EPD. It's the hardest one. You know, if you get A1, because everything flows through, so all of the products, for example, in here, then populate all the other parts of this sort of life cycle assessment down here. But I don't want to go too much into the sort of software itself at this stage. I'm going to do another whole video on Easy EPD and show you just how easy it is to sort of get things set up in the system. But the idea is you have this life cycle assessment here, and once you have that, that will then go off to the verifier to be verified. Then you've got an EPD. Okay, and that's all it is really. If you've got a life cycle assessment like this, the EPD part is just getting this verified. That's all. You know, there's no sort of mystery about it all. It's really quite straightforward. Okay, so that's the life cycle assessment. You're going to need one of those for the EPD. Let's get back to the presentation here. We're on the home straight now. So that's how they're created. Let's just talk a bit about the product category rules. What they do is they ensure standardization. So it means that if someone's producing, for example, door frames. So if someone's doing door frame A and they want to see whether it's better than door frame B, if they were both calculated in different ways, nightmare. So the PCR, the product category rule, said no, this is how you calculate all of the impacts from door frame A and door frame B. So it means you can compare. That's what they are. They're ISO standards, there's loads of them, and the carbon consultant will work with you to make sure you're using the right one for your calculations. Okay? As I say, there are quite a few of them. Once we have the LCA that we think meets all the requirements of the product category or the PCR, what we can do is send it off to an independent third-party reviewer, and they must have the right accreditation. So we've got a list of people that we work with for the Easy EPD service, and you know what, we've got a good rate from them. So we've got kind of preferential rates, which is going to help you, I think, because we've got volume that we're putting through the system. And the verifier's job is to look at the LCA that you've produced. They've got a form, it's about 12 pages on a tick list saying, does it do this? Yes. Does it do that? Yes. Nightmare form. But they will go through their processes to make sure that everything in the LCA is, everything's in there that needs to be in there, and the stuff that is in there is done in the way that the PCR says it should be done. Now, in my experience, different verifiers work in different ways at different speeds. And I hate to say it, there's a bit of variation in how much detail they go into. So that's why we kind of get involved. And at the start we say, well, look, you can choose verifier A, B, C, or D. If you go with A, then you know it's cheap, but it takes ages. Verifier B, do you know what? They're super fast, but oh my god, they're expensive. Typical cost for verification is probably in the region of £3,000 to £5,000. Okay, and with Easy EPD, we add those costs on because it does vary depending on what verifier you use. Okay, but it's a one-off process at the start. You will need it refreshed later, but that's much cheaper because, as I say, the work's been done once, and if you use the same verifier, brilliant. They don't have to do as much work the second time round. Okay, so that's the verification process. It is fair to say it does take some time, and it's jolly annoying. They work through their processes, and there's a lot of back and forward between our carbon consultants and the verifiers on your behalf, saying, you know, the verifier was saying, have you done that? And our consultants were saying, yeah, we have, it's over there, look, you know, is that calculated in the correct way? Of course it is. Have a look here, it's just what you need, etc., etc. So we do all of that kind of negotiation for you on your behalf to try and get your EPD verified. It's in everybody's best interest. Okay, once it's verified, sorry, I didn't mention here, how long does it take? Sometimes, you know, the fastest one we've seen go through is about 6 weeks. The slowest one is probably, you know, about 4 or 5 months. You know, it depends on workloads of the verifiers and, as I say, how much detail they choose to go into. And because they're third party, it wouldn't be right, and we don't tell them how to do their job. We're not qualified to do that. Let them get on and work through their process. But choosing the right one at the start, we can guide you and say, probably use this one, etc., etc. Okay. Once it's verified, you've then got an LCA that has been verified by a third party, and the third party has all the insurances and the qualifications they need to do that. What you need to do now is publish it, okay? So we typically use EPD International, that's part of the Easy EPD service. And when we push it up to EPD International, it gets a number, it gets an official number. And at that point, you've got yourself an EPD. You've got your EPD reference number, and it's published on the central databases. What that means is that anybody who wants to look at them, as I said earlier in the video, you can actually call them up, and they're all in one place, so you can compare forklift A to forklift B to forklift C, etc. Okay, we'll handle that for you. There's a setup charge at the start, but they do make, if you're a company with less than X staff, I can't remember what X is, but if you're a smaller company, if you're not, for example, Mars or something, then you get a discounted rate, which is quite good. And for a couple of our clients, we've got the discounted rate, so it just saves you a bit of money. A couple of £1,000 really is the setup fee, and the annual publication is either 1,000 or €2,500, depending on the size of your company. Okay, but there is an annual cost to keep it published on these databases. Okay, let's have a look. What does one look like? Here it is on the screen in all its glory. They're about 12 pages, give or take. And there's lots of figures in them. So the front bit is the kind of, I don't know, the words, this is the door frame. It's a really good door frame. It's made of the following components, ... And all the statements of who is it for, which is the exact product in your product range that this refers to. And then, that's about 4 pages, 5 pages. Once all that's out of the way, and you explain which PCR you've used and why you've used it, and again, the consultant will do that for you. Once you've done all that, the rest is data tables. So it's got loads and loads of data tables, and they do 2 things. They give you the result of the analysis that's been done, and second, because of the transparency, you can see how that has been done. Okay, so someone could look at it and go, oh, I can verify that from start to end. All the numbers add up. It's been done in the correct way. Really coming into the last bit now, who uses them? Architects, engineers, construction, largely it's construction, and the main people doing it on their procurement teams. Someone looking to buy a really good forklift truck, A versus B, rather than sort of any old forklift truck. So it's generally procurement, and it's generally surrounding construction at the moment, although there are a lot of moves in the electrical space, and a lot of electricals these days are also getting EPDs. Okay. Why would you do one? I said at the start that sustainability has become a bit of a driver for it, but you'll find that when you try and sell to some clients, they require them. I said at the start that house builders require them. That's becoming more and more sort of prevalent. So the biggest driver is that you want to show off. Either you want to sell to one of the companies that requires it, like a construction company, or secondly, one of the clients we've got, they produce steel girders that have a really high use of recycled steel in them, and they know that their girders have less impact, less emissions certainly, than the other comparable girders on the market. So they do 2 things. They produce an EPD to demonstrate that their product is green, and secondly, they update it every 2 years. So you don't have to wait for 5 years because of these changing factors. Because they can use more and more, they're finding new and better ways to put more recycled steel into the process. They update it way faster than the 5-year cycle. They're quite interesting. Sectors using it, I think I've done that to death, so I'm not going to labour that. How to start, couple of slides now, then we're there. How to start. First off, identify which products need EPD. If you have a chat to our sales consultants, they will help you figure out whether you need an EPD per product or whether you can group products together under one EPD, which saves you a lot of time, a lot of effort, and saves you a bit of money as well. So if you can group the products, it's probably better to do that, but there are rules, and the product category rules, the PCRs, say what the rules are. Yeah, so there's general guidelines, but the PCR is specific, saying you can group products together if, for example, they're very similar, or they're made in the same factory, or the same product comes from a different factory, etc., etc. There's a list of stipulations, and the sales consultants will help you think about that, and then the consultants themselves will kind of deep dive on that at the start of the process with you. So you need to identify what products need an EPD. My advice to everybody is start with your most popular product. Don't make it complicated. Don't try and group them together in the first place. Just go for a nice simple EPD to get you off the blocks. Once you've been through it and you know how the software works, you can then do your other ones and sort of pile in. But get started with probably your most popular product and a nice simple EPD to get you off the blocks. Then you need to sign up to the EPD platform, Easy EPD. As I say, that's the software I was showing you. That's the guts of it. That produces all of the kind of calculations that you need. Can't do it without, so you're going to need something like that. And I think, as I say, the Innistic one is particularly easy to use. But get one of those. Work with the carbon consultant to identify your PCR. Which of the rules set you need to follow, and then get started with your LCA. And then you're in process. The rest is just a lot of data entry at the start, but just following the process through. It's not hard. If you've got all the material, you've got all these sort of materials. If you've got details of the materials you buy, not hard, well worth doing. But that's if you do those 4 steps, you'll be on your way to an EPD. The common pitfalls, biggest one by a long shot, is when you look up. You might say, for example, what's in your product? Steel. Yeah, okay. I buy that, but you need to know what type of steel, where did you get it from, how much did you purchase? Okay, you need that information. You can't not have that. And if you want a bit of fun, just look up all the different types of concrete and cement in the world. There's loads of them. Okay, but you need to know which one you purchased. Which one goes into your product. That's probably the hardest part out of all of it, which is why I say that A1 is the hardest module, because that's where that happens. That right at the start it says, right, okay, you use 30 tons of it. What 30 tons of what precise steel? If you can do that, the rest is probably quite easy. Okay, you also need where it comes from, the shipping information. That does trip a couple of people up, but that first bit is probably the bit. If you haven't got the data, you're going to need to get the data before you start. Okay. Underestimating cost and time. The software does speed it up a lot. It is significantly simpler using the software. We quite like it, so it's really quite a joy to use. So they're the common pitfalls. Poor quality data being by far and away the most common one. Okay. Future trends. It's all going digital. Yeah, of course it is. So instead of producing a PDF and registering it, it's now going, with structured data. And again, the Innistic system, when it's defined, they haven't defined it yet, but when they've defined, we will spit out the right data into the right database. That'll be an automatic function. And then the last one here, key takeaways. It was kind of dangling off the end of the screen. My apologies for that. But EPDs, the key takeaways, kind of the summary. Number one, they're verified environmental data for products, i.e. it's a verified LCA, lifecycle assessment. Okay, that's all it is, lifecycle assessment with a rubber stamp. They're great for trust, compliance and market differentiation. If your forklift hasn't got an EPD, why not? Really, to be honest, if you're serious about the environment, why haven't you got an EPD for your forklift truck? So they do build trust and allow you to compare A to B to C to D. The Easy EPD software makes things much easier, and from start to end, allocate yourself about, 5,000 plus verification publication and about 6 months worth of time. And if you can do it in 3 months, brilliant. I can't see you doing it much faster than 3 months, to be honest. It's probably, I've not seen it. But they do take a bit of time. But 3 to 6 months elapsed, so it's not full-time work. You can get on with your day job in the meantime. Most of the people we deal with have got other things to do during the day rather than just doing EPDs all the time. But elapsed 3 to 6 months. His cost is as per the screen, hidden at the bottom, as again, my apologies. And verification, publication, as I say, a few £1,000s, typically 3,000 to 5,000. Publication, £1,000 to £2,000 a year, depending on the size of your company. All right. So there you go. Let's ping this back here now. I hope that was useful. My tea is certainly going a bit cold on me, so maybe I've been talking too much, but I hope that was useful for you. As I say, my book, Net Zero for Business, goes into some of these things in a little bit more detail. Probably not as much detail as I've gone into here, but it's still a useful resource for you. Have a look at the teachable courses when they're out later this year. That will, if you were like working your way through a guided sort of structure, that will help you there. And if you need any sort of help or guidance, just give us a call. You know, my job in life, my mission is to help companies become more sustainable. That's why I set this company up, and that's certainly why I sort of enjoy talking to clients to help them down that journey. So if you think you have any questions to do with, you know, EPDs, life cycle assessments, anything to do with carbon footprinting or sustainability reporting, give me a nudge if you've got a problem, and if I can help you, I certainly will. All right, I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next time.